I am Emma, one of the children at Grace Field Orphanage. Here, there is a taboo that Mama, who raises us, always warns about. No one is allowed to go near the fence and the gate that separate us from the forest outside. Out of curiosity, my friends and I approached the gate of Grace Field Orphanage for the first time to see the scenery outside. The gate connects the inside of the orphanage with a vast surrounding forest, another world that we children have never seen. We have been here since birth, and I am no exception. We all obey Mama's instructions and dare not step outside the gate. A friend named Ray doesn't believe that the forest is as dangerous as Mama says. To him, this is clearly just a lie to cover something up. Norman, another friend of my age, also longs to see the scenery outside the orphanage like any other child. The boy seemed calmer than his two friends, slowly approaching to grasp the cold iron bars of the fence, his eyes unable to hide a lingering sadness. Norman asked if we knew what danger the iron fence around Gracefield was protecting everyone from, but in reality, no one could answer that question. Another morning began at Gracefield Orphanage. Compared to the other children, my group has become the older brothers and sisters. Therefore, I also have more responsibilities towards the children living in the shared home. After hearing the morning alarm bell, I wake up first and, as usual, wake up my roommates. The space inside the orphanage becomes lively after the children are awakened. They play and chase each other, a truly peaceful morning scene. I lead my roommates to the dining hall, and on the way, we meet Dawn, who is carrying the adorable little Connie, holding a stuffed rabbit. The little girl with big round eyes and a constant smile on her lips looks so cute as she greets me. Inside the dining hall, Ray and Norman are pushing large food carts, arranging them on the tables in preparation for breakfast. Seeing them, I cheerfully greet them while playfully teasing the kids. The energetic, cheerful girl attracts many children to follow her and play. Norman looks at the familiar scene and smiles along, gently teasing that I'm so lively even before breakfast. Ray, with a personality opposite to Norman's, finds a way to annoy me, mockingly asking if I'm only 5 years old. Hearing that, I angrily put the child on my back down and declare that I'm one of the oldest here, already 11 years old. Mama, who raises us, hears this and laughs heartily. The morning scene couldn't be more harmonious. Mama sits down at the table, rings a bell, gathers the children, and leads them in prayer before breakfast. After breakfast, as usual, all the children in the orphanage have to take an intelligence test. The results show that besides me, my two friends Ray and Norman also got the highest scores in the class. Mama gently praises the three of us for doing very well and achieving perfect scores. Our achievement makes the other children both envious and respectful. The three of us are respectively called geniuses, Norman with his outstanding intellect, Ray, whose intelligence rivals that of a genius, and finally me, with extraordinary physical abilities and academic performance second to none. The appearance of three geniuses at the same time is something unprecedented at the orphanage. No wonder Mama is so happy today. Don, the dark-skinned boy who didn't want to be outdone, challenged Norman to a game of tag. Unlike most of the children who play tag during recess, Ray quietly goes to a green corner under a tree and starts studying a book in his hand. In this game of tag, Norman never considered Don a worthy opponent and easily caught the one hiding, even kindly pointing out his friend's weakness. Don is too hasty and hot-tempered, making him frustrated to the point of tears without being able to do anything. The last person Norman finds is me. He finds me by using a tactic of pretending to be in danger, forcing me to reveal myself. I disagree with this result and roll on the ground, spinning in circles under the tree next to Ray. Ray closes the book in his hand, looks at me, then shifts his gaze to the calm person sitting next to him, Norman. He starts evaluating Norman's gameplay, saying he won thanks to strategy because, in terms of physical strength, I am stronger than anyone. In other words, Norman is a very smart person, he says while pointing to his head to emphasize. All the children have been found, and the game of hide and seek begins again. During the second round, while running to hide, Norman and I accidentally end up in the area with the iron fence. We both remind each other of Mama's warning not to go near the fence because it is very dangerous. Ray suddenly appears from behind, overhears our words, and once again asserts that everything Mama says is a lie. Pointing out his thoughts, he tells us to look and see if there is anything truly dangerous. If there were real danger, this small fence would not be enough to protect everyone. And in all the years of living at Grace Field, nothing dangerous has ever gotten in. I don't believe Ray and insist that Mama is always right. Hearing the argument, the children gather around to eavesdrop, and among them are a few who are approaching the iron fence for the first time. Naively looking out, they ask if the time will come when we can leave this place. The orphanage doesn't keep children past the age of 12. A little girl skeptically asks why we've never received letters from those who left before. Norman thinks that perhaps the older siblings have to consider the feelings of their foster parents. Don disagrees because we have lived together since birth, no different from a family. The girl with glasses next to him agrees, saying they must be so happy that they've forgotten this family. Ignoring this topic, the children share their dreams for when they go out into the world. Some want new clothes, food, or simply to see a train. When asked, Norman says he wants to go to places he has never seen. I am curious about my other friend, but Ray is not as excited as the other children. He bows his head and whispers that before leaving this place, he just hopes to survive. Connie squeezes in between us and promises to write letters to everyone because today is her last day at the orphanage. Her soft, clear voice echoes through the canopy, saying she will not forget her home and wants to become someone like Mama, never abandoning any child. That night, Connie is called by Mama, who carries a lantern to lead her out the back gate, followed by the admiring gazes of the children. Nothing would have happened if Connie hadn't forgotten her stuffed rabbit. Norman and I hurriedly chase after her, hoping to catch up and give the little girl her friend. Ray doesn't follow. He just holds an oil lamp, blinking as he stands in a corner of the orphanage watching the two of us. The two children step outside the gate for the first time, ready to be scolded by Mama upon their return. But we don't know that we are about to discover something far more terrifying. Inside the dark warehouse, only the sound of two children's footsteps and the echoing drip of water can be heard. After searching everywhere, we still haven't found Connie until I curiously open the curtain behind the truck. I am petrified, backing away step by step. Norman notices something is wrong and steps forward to see. The sight inside is horrifying. Connie has been killed and hung upside down. Her eyes are still wide open in fear, her face covered in blood. Just then, laughter comes from the door next to us. Norman quickly pulls me to hide under the truck. From under the truck, the two children see Connie being lifted by a pair of long, bony hands. The demon's mouth drools as it praises how delicious the little girl looks, saying human flesh is truly the finest delicacy. They want to eat Connie, but this is not something they can have because the human meat produced from Grace Field is all high-quality meat for the rich. I tremblingly ask where our mama is. Norman next to me quickly covers my mouth. We hear these creatures start talking to the person we want to rely on right now, Mama Isabella. The person called Mama is receiving orders to prepare for the harvest of the 3 children who scored perfectly on the intelligence test. The one giving the order is about to leave when he smells the scent of 2 children. Fortunately, Norman found a way to help me escape before we were discovered. We stop in a clearing, sit down, and pant heavily. I cannot accept this reality and repeatedly scream that the little girl was not Connie. Norman looks up, trying to hold back his falling tears, and confirms to me that the little girl was indeed Connie. Ray is still standing in the same spot when the two of us return. Seeing us, he immediately asks what happened. Norman lowers his voice and gently says that we didn't make it in time. Back in the room, I still can't stop crying. I can hardly accept that we are being raised just to be eaten. Norman calms down and decides we must leave this place. He encourages me not to worry because with the 3 of us, escaping from here is entirely possible. I cry harder, saying that if we do that, everyone here will die. I don't want to lose any more family members. Norman sits in thought for a long time as if gathering all his courage, saying that getting everyone out of here is not impossible. Sitting down next to me, he affirms once again that everything will be all right. I, still panicking, say that escaping from the demons is impossible. Suddenly remembering the tactics we used when playing hide and seek, my eyes widen as I look at my friend. Norman once again affirms that everyone will survive. On the other side of the gate, Isabella has not yet returned to the orphanage. Now in her arms is the stuffed rabbit that Norman and I left behind, her whole body hidden in the shadows, preparing for a new plan. The next morning, the activities inside the orphanage proceed as usual. Mama still has a smile on her face, taking care of each child just like a mother. The image is so familiar, but in my eyes now, I cannot hide the horror. In contrast, Norman has regained his composure after a long night. He still cheerfully leads a few children into the dining hall to greet everyone. Seeing my stiff expression, Norman gets worried and finds an opportunity to remind me to act normally because going to the gate yesterday and seeing things we shouldn't have was our fault. Moreover, Isabella has found Connie's stuffed rabbit, although for now, she doesn't know who left it. Norman encourages me to smile so we won't be discovered. The 2 of us will win. I still can't accept what is happening. I keep talking about the lives of the children in the orphanage, living with delicious food and pristine white clothes. But after that, it's just about preserving valuable goods and waiting for a random day to become a victim, taken away to be butchered. Norman interrupts me, saying it's not exactly random because he clearly remembers the conversation between the demons and Mama. The demons weren't very pleased with Connie because she was classified as average quality. From that, Norman analyzes that the age of the children might correspond to the quality of the meat. If he remembers correctly, the siblings who were shipped out were all between the ages of 6 and 12. If a 6-year-old child like Connie is rated as average, then the best quality would be, I finish his sentence, 12 years old. But I still don't understand the scoring of the children in the intelligence tests. I don't think before asking Norman if a higher score means tastier meat. We never know our individual scores unless we get a perfect score. I especially don't understand why they need to rely on scores. We both wonder if there's any meaning behind these numbers. Norman's eyes widen with his hypothesis. The different things tested in the exams are all related to the human brain. This means the brain is the most delicious part to eat, and it's not out of the question that the more developed the brain, the tastier the flavor. Norman starts to piece together the timeline of when members of the orphanage are taken away. Based on that pattern, he calculates that the next shipment will be in 2 months at the earliest. Until then, the two of us must figure out a way to help everyone escape. He uses a dry branch to draw a map of Grace Field on the ground. Then he sits down to make a plan. If we draw a simple map of this area, the house would be in the center, surrounded by an iron fence with only one gate leading outside. Norman whispers, wondering if we should escape through the forest, around the iron fence, or through the gate. In my opinion, we can choose the forest because the gate is always closed and only opens for shipping goods. Plus, there are demons there. Next is the issue of timing, but when the nighttime option is mentioned, I object. I am adamant that we cannot move everyone at night. Someone will surely have to be sacrificed. With the time and location decided, the two of us follow the fence to the edge of the forest. The biggest obstacle appears before our eyes. A tall, wide wall with no corners, impossible for a normal person to climb. We encourage each other that we can do it. Besides Mama, there are no other demons. At the end of a fun day, 2 children happen to get lost. Isabella remains calm, smiling like a mother. She takes out a compass, easily pinpointing the location of the 2 lost children. The kids surround Isabella, laughing and celebrating cheerfully, while only Norman and I grow quieter upon seeing the compass's function. Norman asserts that Mama deliberately used this tracking device to show the 2 of us, clearly wanting to send a message that no one can escape. A loud thunderclap illuminates Ray's face in a hidden corner of the orphanage as he observes everything unfolding. Waiting until evening when the orphanage is dim with small lights, the 2 of us continue our plan with the first step, finding ropes. After a brief period of speculation, Norman thinks that although Mama has a tracking device, she can't always pinpoint our location because if she could, she would have known we were the ones at the gate that night and would have issued a warning. Norman is asked for help by a little boy, so he leaves for a moment. Just then, Mama arrives and sees me standing before a sorrowful painting, looking at the children. Isabella gently asks why I look so pale. She looks into my eyes and confirms that I wasn't very cheerful this morning either. I hide my fear, smiling brightly to let Mama know that I'm feeling sad because I'll have to leave home soon. I hug Mama tightly, expressing my love for her as I have done many times before. Ray suddenly appears, ringing the bell to signal that evening preparations are complete. Norman and I are hiding behind the stairs. We both sigh in relief, without taking this opportunity. He runs to pull me away, but Mama suddenly asks if the 2 of us went to the gate last night. Norman looks at her, flustered, and answers no, saying he was still at the orphanage playing tag. After everyone has left, Ray once again emerges from the shadows to look at us. On the first night of carrying out the plan, the 2 of us find tablecloths instead of ropes. The next morning, we approach the wall to find a place to hide them. At this point, we start considering telling Ray about what's happening. The advantage is that Ray won't panic. He is also good with machines and has extensive knowledge, so he is definitely a reliable person. While I am still considering, Norman has taken on the task of informing Ray. Ray was just waiting for this line to appear. He steps out from a nearby bush. Once again, he listens to the 2 of us recount the events at Grace Field. When he hears about the plan for everyone to escape together, Ray disagrees, saying it's impossible, not to mention the numbers. The tracking devices on us are already very difficult to deal with. Ray seriously tells me that my grand plan is not feasible, because escaping from here is not enough. The 3 of us don't know what's beyond that gate. There's a very high probability that the outside world belongs to the demons, not a place for humans to live. Taking everyone along would mean death. Leaving them at the orphanage is the safest choice. Just when Ray thinks he has persuaded me, I resolutely say no. I will still get everyone out. I don't want people to die, and I don't want anyone left behind. Ray angrily tells Norman to do something about this idiot, or they will both die along with her. Speaking of which, Ray seems to realize something and looks straight at Norman, asking if he knew about this beforehand. Norman bows his head and whispers that I cried. He also cried, but because he was thinking about his own death while I was crying out of concern for our shared family. Norman, with an innocent face, affirms that he really likes me, and because he likes me, he wants me to always be smiling. Ray can only scold him for being crazy. This decision could also lead to my death. Norman disagrees because he will protect me with his life. He laughs foolishly and asks Ray if he won't abandon the two of us. Will he? Ray maintains a serious expression for a moment, then smiles and scolds us, saying, "What a bunch of idiots." Our plan encounters a major problem when another sister, Crone, arrives to help Mama take care of the children. Sister Crone's room is arranged between mine, Norman's, and Ray's. This arrangement helps her observe the three intelligent children more easily. The three of us hold a small secret meeting after dark. Norman believes we were too focused on the tracking devices and forgot about the possibility of a new supervisor coming to the orphanage. However, Ray feels this is a good thing. Thanks to Crone and the child she brought with her, we will have more information. Another important piece of information we can exploit is that besides the farm we are on, there might be many other farms outside, and the adults are controlled by demons, either from birth or after being captured. According to Ray, once we escape, everything will depend on that. However, our immediate goal is still to find traces of the tracking devices. I am responsible for this task. All day, I interact with and search the children's bodies, but find no signs of implants. There's also nothing in their clothes or shoes. Ray offers his personal assessment that based on current human technology, it is very likely that radio waves are being used, and for such devices to work, they would need batteries that could last for 10 years. The more I listen, the more confused I get. Clearly, such advanced devices shouldn't exist at this time. Ray calmly tells me to put myself in the enemy's shoes and think about where it would be logical to place the devices. Norman bows his head in thought for a long time, then suddenly calls out the name Carol, the child Crone often cares for. Since Carol is new, she will definitely have one. In Isabella's room, Crone sincerely thanks her for accepting her. Crone has heard no small amount of praise for this senior with the rank of Mama. Of all the human meat farms, Isabella's farm has the highest quality goods. Crone expresses her honor to be working with someone she admires. Isabella dismisses the compliment, saying she wants the newcomer to get to work immediately. From a cabinet behind her desk, she takes out a stack of papers containing all the information about the children in the orphanage and asks Crone to memorize it. The next thing she wants to discuss regarding Crone's arrival is helping her watch over the children because someone has discovered their transaction. Crone finds this very interesting and replies that according to regulations, they should find them and hand them over to the person in charge. Crone has just taken one step before being stopped. Isabella does not agree to report to her superiors. Moreover, she has already guessed. The targets are two of the three intelligent older children. She won't do anything to them as long as they don't escape the orphanage before the next transaction date. Before leaving, she reminds Crone that she is absolutely not to do anything unauthorized. Her authority is limited to supervising the children. Isabella emphasizes once again that she is the mama of this school, while Crone is just an assistant, outwardly compliant. But upon returning to her room, Crone is furious that Isabella is covering up her mistake. Crone, with a ferocious expression, glares at the doll in her hand, promising herself that one day she will seize this position of mama. She thinks about what would happen if she caught the children who know the secret and reported Isabella's deceitful behavior. Then Isabella would be fired. This way would be faster than pretending to obey her and then seizing the position. Crone cheers at the thought of catching the kids, seizing the position of mama, and becoming the orphanage manager. In the following days, Crone begins to win the affection of the children in the orphanage. Norman watches the situation with growing concern. If the children love the two adults so much, how will they agree to escape? An even bigger problem concerns the demon. As soon as we escape, the monsters will chase us. Ray picks up a plate and makes a decisive cutting motion, saying there is only one way to stop Mama and Crone from pursuing us. Just then, Crone suddenly approaches and hugs the two of them from behind. She wants to know more about the children with the highest scores in the orphanage, so she asks for their names and scores. After getting the necessary information, she cheers and leaves. Norman recalls Crone's forced smile just now and thinks she didn't just come here to take care of the children. The way Crone looked at the two of us was very different. Perhaps she already suspects us and is therefore approaching us. Ray doesn't understand how she got this information. Norman asks Ray back, besides Mama, who else knows about this? This means Isabella has started to approach the three of us. I wasn't sitting idle either. After learning about the tracking devices, I found opportunities to care for the newly arrived children at the orphanage to check their bodies. I put myself in the demon's position. They wouldn't eat the tracking devices, so they would place them somewhere easy to remove. As I speak, I search the body of the small child in my arms. I discover a red mark behind the child's ear. Years ago, Mama told us this was where blood was drawn for disease testing. Who would have thought the device was placed behind the ear? That night, according to the reporting schedule, Isabella enters a secret room and begins to report that everything is fine. She receives an order from the other side that there must be absolutely no mistakes. The offering for the safari must be of the highest quality. The next morning, during free playtime, the three of us sneak into the forest to report my findings about the tracking devices. After determining the location and size, our next step is to figure out how to remove them. Norman suggests cutting the ear to get them out, but I refuse because Mama often combs the children's hair and would find out. Ray speaks up, saying we should discuss the removal first because in his view, the tracking devices implanted in us are not that common. Ray explains to his two friends that it's not useful because it can't specifically identify who is who and requires a compass to be used. Moreover, when the two of them get near the gate or the wall, it doesn't alert anyone. I wonder why the devices are still implanted in the children if they are not very effective. After a moment of thought, Ray answers that the demons must be confident they can track us as long as the devices are active. He has another theory. They might only notice when the device is broken, like an alarm bell. Ray asks Norman and me to leave this matter to him. The remaining problem is finding a way to escape. The problem is that everyone in the orphanage believes Mama. I propose using the game of tag to help everyone practice. Ray teaches them how to erase their footprints and predict the wind direction while I guide the younger children on how to escape. This entire process is observed by Crone, with a strange smile on her lips. She approaches, wanting to get closer to the children, and suggests that she will be the one to chase and catch them. While playing, she identifies each person's weakness and easily finds them. The game is nearing its final minutes, but she still can't catch Ray's group, which makes her very frustrated about losing. The kids are once again forced to sit down and discuss the upcoming plan, as Crone hasn't made any significant moves since her arrival, and Mama hasn't changed either. However, Norman doesn't think this is normal because Mama is surely using another method to know their whereabouts without needing tracking devices or eavesdropping. There is only one possibility. Among the children, there is definitely a spy. Crone is summoned by Isabella to inquire about what she is doing at the orphanage. Mama says she didn't think Crone would be so obedient and well-behaved. Mama continues, saying Crone not only gets along well with the children, but also plays tag with them wholeheartedly. Hearing this, Crone's face breaks out in a cold sweat, and she doesn't dare to blink as she looks at the woman in front of her. Isabella wants to emphasize to Crone that she is an insurance policy, an insurance that she has summoned to ensure the goods are protected. Therefore, she doesn't need to concern herself with which child knows the secret. Isabella reminds her that she would not hesitate to expose Crone's thoughts about having leverage over her. Isabella stands before Crone and repeats that she is an intelligent person, so she should know what to do and what not to do. Crone suppresses her emotions until she returns to her bedroom, grabs the doll on her bed, rips it in two, and repeatedly curses that hateful old target, telling her to just wait. Norman devises a way for the children to form groups to play tag, as if they were actually escaping. Norman also intends to tell Don and Gilda about everything. They will explain the situation and let those two lead a team. Ray worriedly asks, what if they leak the information to Mama? Norman replies that it will be fine. He will find the informant and persuade them. He will arrange everything smoothly. The team leaders are me, Don, Norman, and Gilda. Dividing the children into groups to practice escaping has worked better than expected. Norman suddenly asks Ray about the progress of breaking the devices and how much more time is needed to complete it. Upon hearing the answer is 10 days, Norman immediately decides that their plan will be executed in 10 days. Ray and I are both shocked and look back at Norman because 10 days is too soon compared to the shipping date we had calculated before. Ray also thinks this decision is not good at all. The next shipping schedule won't happen for another 2 months. They have more than a month to prepare carefully, not a rush 10 days. Norman is not surprised by his teammate's objection and speaks up, saying that just as Ray said, Mama is hoping they would think that way. Therefore, to trick her, they need to complete the plan as soon as possible. By all means, they must finish breaking the devices in the next 10 days and leave this place before winter. That evening, while the children are asleep, Don and Gilda are invited by the three of us to the library to be told about Connie being killed and the other siblings being sold to bad people. Don laughs out loud, saying that's impossible. He doesn't believe it and thinks it's just a joke from his friends. Norman, with a serious expression, tells him to think about the wall, the gate, and the letters that were never received. Seeing everyone's serious expressions, Don stops laughing and asks if they are joking. Ray, sitting on a bookshelf, looks down at Don, once again affirming it's the truth. I, with teary eyes, say, Mama is a bad person, she's gonna sell the children. When Don hears someone speak ill of Mama, he becomes furious, shoves me against the wall, and demands I take back what I said. Gilda, sitting nearby, finally calls Don's name to calm him down, adding that I love the house and Mama and would have no reason to lie. Gilda, in a weak voice, added that she had also noticed something very strange since the night Connie was taken away. Norman and I went to the gate. In her understanding, the two of them would apologize immediately, and everything would go back to normal. At this point, she started to cry, saying that she had seen me suddenly become too serious, to the point that she didn't dare to ask. Gilda covered her face and cried harder, asking if I had seen Connie being sold. Norman answered yes, but that they couldn't do anything in time and weren't sure if Connie was still alive. He continued, saying that it wasn't clear if what had just happened could prove anything. But he and Ray had been collecting everyone's scores. They discovered a pattern. Those who were adopted were all 6 years old or older, in order from lowest to highest scores. After the conversation, everyone agreed to cooperate to help the kids escape the orphanage. After everyone returned to the room, Ray stayed behind to ask Norman why he didn't tell them that everyone was already dead. Norman explained that it was the best way to get those two to join the group. Ray disagreed, saying that if Don and Gilda weren't the spies, this method was too cruel because it gave them non-existent hope. Ray kept asking him how he would tell them the truth. Norman remained calm, saying they would figure it out when the time came because he still suspected them of being spies. He had set a trap, telling them about the hidden rope, the tool they would use to escape from here. Norman told Don it was under the bed, while the location for Gilda was in the bathroom ceiling. Whoever informed Mama, causing the rope to disappear, would be revealed as the spy. Gilda, after learning the truth, became closer to me. It had been a long time since the two had sat down for such a happy chat. Taking advantage of me being asleep, Gilda quietly snuck out of the bedroom to meet Crony. At the same time, Mama also received a letter from under the door. As soon as Gilda arrived at Crony's room, I followed, pressing my ear to the door to listen to the conversation inside. Gilda's clear voice rang out, thanking Crony for always caring about her recently. But now everything was fine, and Gilda asked her to return the piece of paper. Crone coldly asked if I had told her everything. She offered a condition to keep Gilda safe. Just tell her all the people involved in the secret. Gilda summoned all her courage, pushed her away forcefully, and said she didn't understand what she was talking about. Gilda returned to the room, saw me, and immediately ran to hug me, sobbing. The next morning, Ray and Norman received news from me that Gilda was innocent. Norman, forcefully washing clothes in a basin, asked Ray why someone would agree to be a traitor. Ray replied that they might receive some special privileges, such as being exempt from shipment and becoming food, instead becoming an adult. Norman whispered, "So, to ensure their life." Norman found me to continue the question about the traitor. He wanted to know what I would do if the traitor was challenging them. That person would be guaranteed their life. I repeated the question, challenging them to avoid being shipped out and continue to live. After a moment of thought, I still wanted to bring that person with us. Because if everyone escaped, that person's life would no longer be guaranteed. Besides, I chose to trust, because Ray once said that none of our siblings are bad people. We are a collective that grew up together. I smiled brightly, affirming that even if that person hindered our path, betrayed us, or called me naive, I still wanted to trust them. Norman smiled brightly, saying he should have known I would answer that way. Leaving my room, Norman went to check the places where the ropes were hidden. The result was that the rope under the bed was gone. Ray went with Norman, saying that Don was definitely the traitor. Norman thought about something and just confirmed it with a soft sound, pretending not to see the smile on Ray's face. Only when that smile disappeared did Norman look straight into Ray's eyes, scrutinizing him and concluding that he was the actual traitor. Ray was horrified for a moment, but quickly regained his usual cold expression. Ray laughed loudly and asked Norman what made him think he was the spy. Norman replied that Ray probably didn't realize he had set a trap for all three of them. Don was told the rope was under the bed, while Gilda was told it was in the bathroom ceiling. However, that was only the information Norman had told Ray. The truth was that Norman had told Don it was in the dining room and told Gilda it was in the library. Unexpectedly, the rope under the bed had disappeared. After hearing this, Ray fell back on the bed, laughing loudly, saying he thought he had done well. After a moment, he sat up straight, looked at Norman, and declared that he was indeed Mama's spy. But he also wanted to know when he was first suspected. Norman sat down beside him and replied that it was since Crone arrived. He didn't want to believe this was true because having Ray in the plan would reduce difficulties. And on the other hand, Ray could perfectly control the situation. Norman wanted to know what other secrets Ray was hiding. He understood that Mama would never trust a random informant or spy. Hearing these words, Ray did not hesitate to tell Norman that he had been Mama's spy for a very long time. Basically, her trusty hound. Norman loudly interrupted Ray, asking if he knew everything and still helped her. Was all the time preparing everything with me also a lie? Ray only asked 3 words. What does Norman want? Norman began to list on his fingers. First, continue to be by my side as usual and ensure everyone's safety. Second, for Ray to tell all the information he knows, and third, to become a member of his team. Norman repeated the question. Did Ray want to become his spy? Ray looked at Norman confused, asking, wouldn't it be easier to achieve that goal by pretending not to know you are a spy and continue using you to do what Norman wants? Why go to the trouble of setting a trap for you to fall into and then express the desire to cooperate? Norman smiled with satisfaction and replied that it was because we are a family. He knew that Ray had intentionally arranged everything so that he and I would see what happened to Connie outside the gate. If Ray was really Mama's informant, he wouldn't have helped the two of them realize the truth. Norman insisted that the truth was Ray was controlling them. From the tracking devices to the timing of the escape to the sudden progress of the plan, looking back at everything that happened, Ray was indeed Mama's spy. Ray did not deny Norman's speculations. He had indeed sold himself to Mama in exchange for an escape plan. The best way to get information is to side with the enemy. Through observation, Ray concluded that Mama cared more about benefits than rules. Basically, he only requested two things. First, if he cooperated, Ray would not be shipped immediately. Second, the reward for achieving results was some metal pieces not available in the house. As a result, she complied and brought many things as long as they were not dangerous. As for the tracking device, after years of experiments, Ray had figured out how to destroy it. Ray confidently told Norman that he was the strongest card in front of him. Information about Mama, about the tracking device that he had, and had been preparing for a long time. Ray covered his face emotionally, saying he just wanted the two of them to get to the gate without being discovered, all to ensure that the two of them would not be killed. Ray let Norman know that he was not their enemy, nor was he an ally. Therefore, he now wanted to set a condition if Norman wanted him to become an ace up his sleeve. He was willing to help them and tell Norman what he wanted in order to deceive Mama. Ray's condition was only one thing: deceive me. Just pretend to follow my wish of taking everyone out. But at the last minute, leave the kids behind. Even if they were to bring more people, he would only accept Don and Gilda. Norman couldn't believe his ears and asked Ray if he wanted to give up the plan to escape with everyone. Although everyone's training was going very well, Ray interrupted, saying that it still couldn't change the fact that they were a burden. This way, he could save the two of them. Otherwise, they would just be waiting to die. Ray added that if you don't want everyone to die as soon as they escape, it's better to leave them behind. After finishing his words, he walked straight out of the room, waiting until the door closed to let out a smile that no one could see. After leaving the room, Norman went to Mama's room. Seeing him arrive, Isabella reminded him that he was late today and she wanted to know how things were going. Ray calmly replied that everything was normal. Both I and Norman are carrying out the escape plan, but the biggest problem is Crone. He told her to be careful. Ray bluntly said that Crone shouldn't have come here. He was genuinely sad that Mama still didn't trust him, despite having worked for her for 6 years. Isabella scolded him, saying that if Ray hadn't let those two fools go to the gate, things wouldn't be this complicated. She looked into Ray's eyes searchingly, saying she didn't think just two useless children would be so hard to watch. Ray apologized but mentioned that he was currently atoning to his best friend, right? The next morning, I approached the two of them, asking about the rope plan and whether they had found out who the spy was yet. This time, Ray admitted it was him. He had arranged for the two of them to go outside the gate and had handled all the problems they had caused. After hearing this, I felt guilty and asked quietly if Ray still wanted to help me and the kids escape. Ray repeated that he would help me and everyone escape. My eyes widened as I looked at Ray, whispering that he didn't seem like his usual self, but I was very happy because now Ray wanted to help everyone escape. Suddenly, my eyes filled with tears as I whispered that Ray had known everything for a very long time. It must have been very painful to watch his siblings be taken away one by one. I stepped forward, grabbed Ray's collar, and reassured him that he was no longer alone. However, I also didn't want to lose any child in our shared home. Don and Gilda stood at a distance, observing, worriedly wanting to know how long the three of them would continue to discuss. Not long after, Gilda and I discovered one of Mama's secrets. She would disappear periodically at exactly 8 o'clock every day. I took out a map of the orphanage, circling a spot that I believed was a secret room inside Mama's bedroom. Next to Mama's bedroom were the bathroom and the office wall. I discovered that whenever she disappeared, she would usually go into the laundry room or the office. Therefore, there must be a door inside leading to the secret room. Don wondered what she did in the secret room. Ray stood up and answered, reporting. She has to report on schedule to headquarters. After getting this information, Don, despite the danger, snuck away from my group and went to the office by himself, eager to quickly find out the truth to save Connie and the other children. Gilda, worried, went with Don there. He tried every way but couldn't open the secret door that I had guessed existed. In frustration, he punched the bookshelf and shouted loudly. Gilda, calmer than Dawn, observed the surroundings for a long while before approaching a part of the bookshelf that was shaped differently and pulled it out. Inside, a door actually appeared. All the problems inside the house were now in the hands of my group. The training was going well, and the tracking devices could be destroyed, according to Ray. Next, we needed to find out about everything outside and move faster than the adults. Therefore, we could definitely escape over the wall. Norman walked around analyzing the escape strategy, which was divided into 3 parts. First, climb over the wall. Second, run fast and get away safely. Third, find a way to survive and live independently outside. For now, the first step was within reach. Next is the second step. After getting out, we have to escape the pursuit of the demons. Norman emphasized that we needed to check and prepare for that. I provided Norman with additional information. After climbing a tree, I saw a forest outside the wall. Norman continued, saying that was exactly what the 3 of us needed to check. I smiled brightly, saying I still had one more thing related to the outside world that I wanted to show everyone. In the dining room, Dawn deliberately bumped into Mama to steal her key, preparing to unlock the secret room with Gilda. My group, unaware of the situation here, had gathered in the library. I had found all of William Minerva's books and laid them out on the table for Ray and Norman to see. I wasn't sure who he was, but he could very well be our ally. I pointed to the owl symbol on each book. Through that symbol, we could see the messages the author had conveyed. Norman and Ray quickly deciphered the Morse code by using the circle around the owl. The meaning of the words in order were monster, escape, farm. Thanks to the code, the message was hidden from the demons and adults. Ray expressed his thoughts about this man, Minerva, believing he might be an ally. However, they couldn't know if he was still alive. Therefore, Ray advised them not to have overly high expectations. Norman was more optimistic. He believed that if he was an ally from the outside, it meant that humans still existed. Norman then took out 2 other books whose Morse code I couldn't understand. Regarding the content, one was an adventure novel, and the other was a mythology book, but I didn't understand much about either. In contrast to the atmosphere of the 3, Dawn and Gilda were immersed in fear in the basement of the secret room. They found many items left behind by the children who had departed. Gilda trembled as she spoke. It was really true. Just as I said, no one was ever adopted. Dawn accidentally opened a box containing Isabella's communication device, which they had heard Ray mention before. He had emphasized that if Mama or Crone found out, they would be done for. Connecting all the events, Dawn couldn't believe it. His voice was filled with horror. If Mama is that dangerous, doesn't that mean Connie and everyone else are gone? Gilda replied, didn't Norman say he didn't know their exact situation? Dawn interrupted, saying he didn't believe them because they didn't believe the 2 of them. Back in the library, the 3 of us went to the dining room only to find that Dawn and Gilda were not there. The 3 of them frantically searched for Dawn everywhere, worried that he was in danger. When they finally met Dawn and Gilda with confused faces, they knew that the 2 had just returned from Mama's secret room. Ray scolded the 2 for doing something so stupid. What if the room was equipped with cameras or tracking devices? If Mama or Crone found out, not only the 2 of them, but everyone would be in danger. Dawn suddenly spoke up in dissatisfaction, asking what danger. Could it be being killed when they had found Connie's teddy bear and many other children's toys inside the secret room? Dawn angrily recalled Norman's words about saving them, while in fact, they were already all dead. Hearing that, I stood up, bowed my head before Dawn, and apologized repeatedly. Dawn came closer and asked if I was still hiding anything, to tell them everything. Upon hearing the truth about the farm and the demons, both Dawn and Gilda were extremely terrified. Dawn rushed forward and punched Norman and Ray, asking them if he was a burden. He asked if they thought he was so weak and useless that he needed to be protected. When he first heard the request for help from the 3, Dawn thought the opposite because he was capable. He admitted he wasn't as smart as them, but at least they were a family. They were siblings. Dawn earnestly said that they should at least trust him. That night when only Gilda was left, Dawn told her that he was not sad for being seen as weak. It was because of his own helplessness, being unable to do anything to help Connie and the others. Dawn was pained by his own powerlessness that had turned him into a weak person. I heard crying, took a lamp from inside the orphanage, went outside, stood in front of the 2 and apologized. It was I who was wrong for accepting being hated, but not trusting the 2 of them enough. Norman followed my words, also bowing his head and apologizing for making the wrong decision. The light from my lamp called to Ray's face, and he gently said that even if the worst happened, he would handle it. Ray also apologized for the things he had caused. Dawn and Gilda now knew the whole truth. I asked them one more time, even if the outside might be a world of demons, do they still want to escape with us? There was 1 week left until the escape day, and all the plans so far were fine. They just needed to find a way to escape. The next morning, following Norman's instructions, Don and Gilda found bleach and herbicide and brought them. These were 2 things that would help them find a way to escape over the wall. As for the tracking device to keep Mama and Crone from noticing, Norman had found a way to divert their attention to something else and create situations to make them not look at the compass. Ray was the one who approached Mama and relayed the false information Norman provided. Inside Isabella's office, Ray was having a wound on his face cleaned by her. Taking this opportunity, Ray informed her that Norman was trying to find a way to kill her. Isabella replied that if he wanted to escape with everyone, this thought was inevitable. Ray continued, saying that Norman was collecting hammers, bleach, herbicides, anything he felt was useful. Isabella whispered, "Kill with poison? Sounds quite complicated." Ray suggested to her the option of replacing all those chemicals with fakes. Isabella had no opinion and asked if Ray knew where they were kept. This would be resolved later. Isabella also provided Ray with additional information from the higher-ups, who had just informed that the next shipment would be postponed for a month. Ray smiled, looked up at her, and asked if the next shipment would finally include him. In the forest, my group was not as lucky as Ray. Crone suddenly appeared, blocking them, laughing loudly, saying she knew all the secrets of the 5 of them about the house. She pointed at my face, smiled happily, and asked if they wanted to cooperate. I responded to Crone with a look of horror, the only child who was still calm at this time. Norman told everyone not to worry. Then he used a friendly expression to tell Crone they would follow her. Crone was very pleased, saying this was the right decision. For both sides to achieve their goals, they needed to cooperate. Crone clarified the goals of both sides. They wanted to escape. While she wanted to become the mama of this house, she emphasized once more that she wanted to push Isabella out of the house and take the position of mama. Crone suddenly pulled up her clothes, revealing a string of numbers on her neck, just like the children's, and told them that she also wanted to escape from this situation. Crone spoke of the management system in this place. There was a rather strange condition for girls who met the standard to live until 12 years old. They would have 2 paths to choose from, either continue to die or become a mama. The specific condition was to achieve a certain number of points and be recommended by mama. Crone advised not to choose this path because they would never be able to leave this place again. Once again, Crone showed them a large, neatly stitched scar on her chest, inside which was an implanted chip. If someone with this implant tried to escape from the farm, an electric current would flow in and make their heart stop beating. At the same time, if the heart stopped for any other reason, it would immediately send a signal to the higher-ups. Norman bluntly asked if this meant they couldn't directly kill the adults. Crone didn't answer, but continued to say that she could only live on the farm. Therefore, she wanted to live as fully as possible as a mama. Even if it was fake, it was still living and on the path to achieving this goal. Isabella was the obstacle, but if their group of 5 successfully escaped, she would have to take responsibility, so she would not stop them from escaping. Everyone quickly reported this to Ray. When Crone was not present, Norman expressed his thoughts. If Crone really wanted to help them escape, she just needed to keep quiet and support them at the right time. She revealed her cards only because she wanted them to trust her and to get evidence of the rebellion. In other words, Crone needed proof for the higher-ups to trust her. Therefore, they would be done for if she found the device to break the tracking device. Concrete evidence that they couldn't deny. Ray replied not to worry. He would not reveal it, and it was not yet complete. Gilda worriedly asked me if I would really go to Crone's room to talk. Don also did not understand why they had to cooperate with Crone. Norman explained to them that if they could take advantage of her, they would get more information. While eliminating one person who was in their way, I stood up and encouraged everyone that things would be fine. They had to seize the opportunity. Before leaving, I had one thing I wanted to ask Don and Gilda to do. Crone, as promised, allowed Norman to ask whatever they wanted to know, including about the farm or the headquarters. I held out my hand, wanting to get a clear look at the tracking device. I held the compass out in front of the 2 of them. It was quite simple, only showing the location, but not identifying who was who. I asked Crone if she knew the location or how to break the tracking device. Both were surprised when Crone easily showed them that it was behind the left ear. She didn't know how to destroy it, but if it was tampered with, headquarters would be notified. Therefore, the only option was to cut off the ear. She secretly calculated that the infirmary had enough equipment and medicine for the 5 of them, and she would provide the key. During this conversation, Crone also told them that the children's food was provided by the higher-ups. There were people from the outside who brought clothes and necessities. She had seen them once. The security of this house was not as tight as they thought because people relied on the tracking devices, so there were not many guards. Seeing that the two children had finished asking and were preparing to leave, Crony laughed loudly, saying that they really knew about the tracking devices and how to break them. She continued to say, "People reveal a lot of information just by standing still. From attitude, eyes, sweat, gestures, heart rate, everything shows what they are thinking." She knew this because when the two first heard about the tracking device, they did not try to feel for it. They already had arrangements to remove them, but they were not happy about it at all. Crone mysteriously asked if they had something they wanted to hide from her. In Isabella's office, Ray came and sat as usual. Today he received a camera as a reward and took the opportunity to take a picture of Isabella. She asked why the last reward he desired was a camera. Ray replied that he had only seen cameras in books and wanted to hold one himself. After he left, Isabella approached the desk where Ray had been sitting, picked up the photo, and looked at herself in it. Then, she went to mark the calendar on the wall, ending a day, and whispered something. With the camera in hand, Ray took pictures of everything around the house and the kids playing. When no one was paying attention, Ray found Don and Gilda to talk about today's plan, which would start after lunch. Ray took responsibility for tricking Mama. During this time, Norman and I would observe the surrounding area. Don and Gilda would be outside watching the main window of the orphanage. If anything happened, Ray would signal them, and they would immediately notify me to stop. For now, the plan for lunchtime would be like this. Norman and I followed Ray back to the room to tell him about Crone, knowing that they could break the tracking devices. Norman wanted to speed up the progress to leave as soon as possible. Ray was a little surprised to hear the main point, then took the camera from the cabinet and captured the moment Norman and I were looking at him. Ray held a developing photo in his hand, pointed to the camera, and said this was the final tool. Now they could break the devices at any time. However, Norman was still not at ease because these tools were a double-edged sword. They didn't know if they could find a way to break the devices before being discovered. Ray told Norman not to worry. He had already handled all of those things. As Norman predicted, while everyone was preparing lunch, Crone snuck into Ray's room, searching and turning everything upside down. She was satisfied, holding a piece of paper in her hand as she returned to her bedroom. Finally, she had grasped Isabella's weakness and imagined the life as a mama that she had always wanted. While rejoicing, she was still wondering how Ray knew Isabella's secret when someone came to her door. Crone quickly hid the paper in a messy pile of clothes and rushed to open the door. In front of her was Isabella's emotionless face and a shiny knife being presented. Unexpectedly, the knife turned back to point at her, and with the other hand, Isabella took out a letter saying it was from headquarters. Only after Crone received the letter did Isabella smile with satisfaction and say goodbye. Although she expressed her regret for Crone looked at the letter and then looked up at Isabella with eyes full of panic. Crone was appointed as the mama of Plant 4. Isabella said that a mama position at Plant 4 suddenly became vacant, and she had recommended Crone a long time ago, so now she had been chosen. She reminded Crone that someone was waiting at the gate, so she should prepare her luggage and return to headquarters immediately. As the door slammed shut, Crone knelt on the ground, knowing that Isabella was trying to get rid of her. While packing her things, Crone took out an object and angrily said that she would not let things go Isabella's way. She went to the gate and met an old woman, wanting to give her the paper taken from Ray and report everything. But the old woman was not interested. What she knew was that everything was still under control. Instead, the old woman was angry with Crone's actions that were interfering with Isabella. The old woman emphasized that Isabella was a necessary piece that Crone was not capable of replacing. Crone watched the old woman's back as she walked away, bowed her head, and whispered that they were all the same. She never had a chance to win from the beginning. Crone's mad laughter rang out as the gate slammed shut and a monster slowly approached from the darkness. In Crone's mind, the events she had experienced in her life slowly replayed. From when she was a child adopted into an orphanage, trying to get high scores in exams until she grew up and became a part of headquarters. Among these memories was a time Crone had picked up a pen from a human doctor. The pen and everything she knew about this world had been left in the room for the children before she left. The monster's claws were right in front of her, and Crone's scream echoed. She hoped the children would escape successfully and destroy this terrible world. Ray, as scheduled, went to find Isabella after lunch to exchange the chemicals. Outside, Norman and I would climb the wall to scout the surrounding area. Don and Gilda would be in the courtyard observing the second-floor window of the house. In case the attempt to distract Mama failed, Ray would give a signal to warn my group to stop scouting immediately. Gilda silently prayed, hoping everything would go smoothly. Isabella suddenly told Ray that she had gotten rid of Crone. Ray narrowed his eyes, looked at her, then quickly ran to Crone's room to check. Isabella followed, stepped in, and said softly that she didn't need her anymore. Therefore, she had eliminated both Crone and her child. Mama declared that their agreement ended here. Isabella took out the tracking compass, looked at the moving bright dots, and apologized to Ray for what she was about to do. She forcefully pushed Ray to the ground and locked the door. Then, she continued to look at the compass, saying, "Looking at this movement speed, it must be Emma and Norman heading towards the fence." Isabella also said that she didn't care about the chemicals they had mentioned because she believed that Ray would not let them do that. So the next time they wanted to keep her busy, they should use a different method. Ray angrily shouted, using all his strength to try to break the door and escape. In the yard, when Don and Gilda saw Isabella appear without any signal from Ray, they were horrified. After Mama was out of sight, Don frantically ran into the house to save Ray. The three quickly chased after Isabella, hoping to stop her. Deep in the forest, I heard a sound and threw the rope into the bushes. Seeing Mama, both were a little surprised, but quickly regained their composure, smiled brightly, and asked why she was there. Isabella replied that they had lived together for 10 years. But this might be the first time they had a sincere conversation. She laughed heartily, telling the two to relax. There was no one else but them. She looked at them, emphasizing every word. At this moment, there was only the caregiver and those about to be eaten. But don't misunderstand. She considered the two of them her own children, so they should give up. She continued, saying it was because she loved them very much. She didn't want them to continue suffering. They should return to live happily in a warm home full of love and delicious food, and not have to know about hunger, cold, or the fact that everyone will die. I angrily asked if a happy life meant an end like Connie's. Isabella didn't answer my question, but only mentioned an instant death. Until that moment came, Connie had lived a life full of laughter. I shouted that I didn't need that fake laughter. No matter how much pain I have to endure, I want a life of freedom. I will decide for myself what happiness is. Norman, standing beside me, suddenly called my name and gently shook his head. Taking this opportunity, Isabella continued to urge them to return, saying that there was only despair outside. She wanted the five of them to have a happy life until the very end. Norman caught the emphasis in her words. 5 people, not 3. The two exchanged glances and I nodded. Norman smiled and agreed to be a good kid. At the same time, I ran up and pushed Isabella down. Taking this opportunity, Norman ran in the opposite direction to get the rope. As soon as he got the rope in his hands, Norman heard my scream and turned back to see me being restrained by Isabella. My leg was broken, my scream echoed through the forest, causing the 3 worried people, including Ray, to speed up their search. Isabella held me in her arms, stroking me, sympathizing that I was a pitiful little girl. But it had been a long time since she could hold me so happily like this. She looked at the remaining 4, saying she would manage them until the end, long enough to know how special they were. The highest quality children she had ever raised would be offered to someone special. That was also why she would protect them at all costs. After she finished speaking, my leg had also been given first aid by her. At the same time, she gave them some heavy news. Since I was injured, I could safely welcome tomorrow. She had received news from her superiors congratulating Norman, who had been scheduled for shipment. Everyone who heard this news unconsciously looked at Norman in fear. Isabella carried me back to the orphanage, telling the children not to worry. She had broken it cleanly, so it would heal quickly in about 1 to 2 months. She glanced at Ray, hoping it would be in time for Ray's birthday. Back at the house, Don covered his face in panic, asking what they should do now that Norman was being shipped out and the rope had been taken. Ray reassured them that my leg would heal soon. They would find the rope again and they would carry out the escape somehow. But first, the most urgent matter now was Norman. Gilda, not understanding what was happening, quietly asked why Norman was being shipped out. Ray recalled that Mama had mentioned a change in circumstances. He didn't think both Crone and Norman would have to be taken away at the same time. They couldn't accept the fact that just this morning they were happily washing clothes together, and now he was preparing to leave the world. Ray angrily kicked away the chair at his feet. In the infirmary, Norman held my hand and comforted me, saying they had only lost the rope. Everyone's escape plan would still continue. I interrupted him, saying, "Number." What everyone cared about now was that he was going to be shipped out. I insisted that the escape would succeed and Norman would be with everyone. Norman let go of my hand, saying he would go out to get me some water. The tap was turned on and the cup in Norman's hand fell. For the first time, he showed his helplessness, trembling and crying loudly. When he returned to the room with a smile back on his lips, he found all his friends sitting inside. Ray was the first to speak, telling Norman that he should escape by himself tomorrow afternoon. To be more precise, the next afternoon he should act as if he had escaped, disable the tracking device and pretend to have already escaped. Then hide in the forest until my leg healed, and they would escape together, do it together. Norman objected because even if he escaped, security around the area would be tightened. Ray replied that it wasn't a problem. Based on the house's care policy, security wouldn't increase much. Specifically, this included letting the children grow up freely and strict security. These things helped a healthy child grow up freely and full of emotion. This meant the demons wouldn't appear because if they ruled by fear, the brains wouldn't develop as they wanted. There was only one way to change the security: increase the number of guards outside or the caregivers. Ray could see that Norman didn't want to go on his own, which made Ray very angry, scolding him, saying he didn't have to die. But in the end, Norman still refused, because if he escaped, either Ray or I would take his place. Letting one of his friends die in his place was something Norman couldn't do. Norman insisted that the last thing they could do was take his life, but after that, they would get nothing more. Norman promised to destroy Mama's plot and ensure the escape succeeded. Norman thanked his two friends for always being by his side and asked them to continue the plan without him. I suddenly thought that Ray could also have his leg broken. When seriously injured, he wouldn't be shipped out either. Ray, hearing this, laughed heartily, praising me for being smart. Norman, who was outside the conversation, advised him to wait. There was no guarantee that being injured would prevent the shipment. I replied, then let's get really sick. Surely the demons wouldn't eat sick food. Norman asked the two why they were making such strange suggestions. My eyes sparkled for Norman to live. Anything was possible. Ray gave Norman the device to break the tracking device, telling him to use it tomorrow and escape into the forest, climbing over the wall. Currently, Don and Gilda were looking for a rope for him outside. Norman, for the first time, asked Ray about Mama's secret and how he knew it. No ordinary person could have noticed. Ray sat down on the bed next to me and slowly explained. Normally, memories from early childhood before consciousness tend to be forgotten by humans. It's also called infantile amnesia. However, there are rare cases where some people don't forget. Ray admitted that he had memories from when he was an infant and had discovered discrepancies between them and his memories at the house. Ray gradually recalled that his memory was of being in a warm, hot solution and hearing a lullaby. In addition, Ray also remembered the shape of the demons as well as the other infants. As soon as the tracking devices were implanted, they were divided into 5 groups. Then, he was taken through a tunnel and brought here. Norman guessed that the tunnel must be the gate. Therefore, outside the gate is the headquarters and 5 adjacent farms, which means everything Crone told them was true. The gate was not an exit. Ray informed them that outside that gate there wasn't just a crowd of guards, but also demons and adults. Thanks to this, the security inside was also sparser, because they would only focus on the gate and not enhance security inside the farm. Ray looked at Norman, telling him there was nothing to be afraid of. Tomorrow, he would disappear. Mama announced the news that Norman would be transferred elsewhere. The younger children, who hadn't realized, were still happy. Among them, some of the older ones inadvertently asked, "So soon?" but were reminded by their friends next to them. Their frightened expressions gradually gave way to bright smiles. Also that evening, Norman happened to find the items that Crone had left for them. The plan for the next day proceeded. Norman tied the rope and climbed the wall. However, what he faced was a cliff behind the wall. As dusk fell, Mama smiled, welcoming Norman back to everyone's surprise. Back in the room, both I and Ray were angry, asking Norman why he didn't escape. Norman calmly looked at them and replied that he wouldn't do it. He had no intention of running away and leaving the two of them in danger. Ray let go of Norman's shirt and took a deep breath to regain his usual tone. Informing the two about the cliff, behind the large wall was not the forest they had thought, but a cliff separating the forest. Crone hadn't lied. The demons did not underestimate the children. And with that cliff, no security was needed. I looked at Norman and asked if they could escape from here. Norman took out a blank piece of paper and began to draw what he had seen when he reached the end of the wall. There, the wall split in 2. One continued along the cliff, while the other was pressed against the house. After further analysis, it can be concluded that Grace Field is situated on a hexagonal piece of land surrounded by a cliff, and it is very likely that the west side of the farm is the headquarters. Phil knocked on the door calling for Norman because Mama was calling. He returned the tracking deactivator to Ray, which he hadn't used, along with the newly drawn map. Seeing these items, Ray became angry, realizing that Norman had decided to return from the very beginning. Ray pulled Norman back, asking, "Didn't you say everyone would survive and leave together?" Norman smiled and apologized, saying he couldn't allow himself to make any mistakes because he didn't want anyone to die, and escaping would throw everything off course. Furthermore, Norman didn't want to risk the entire game. Norman told everyone that saying anything more was useless. He had already decided. Ray stepped back and sat on the bed. In the final moments, Norman excitedly ran to hug the two of them, whispering, "So warm." Norman thanked them. Because of them, he had had a beautiful life. Ray shed tears and cursed. "Damn it." I put my arms around Norman's back earnestly, begging him to run into the forest and hide. It wasn't too late. Norman smiled, let them go, and remained firm in his decision. He turned back to pack his things and happened to find 2 cups connected by a string, a creation I had made back then because he had a fever from playing in the snow. Mama had isolated him from everyone in the infirmary. Not wanting Norman to be lonely while sick, I had frequently snuck into the sick room and been caught by Mama. Ray stood outside the door with a book, telling Mama that idiots don't get sick, but the 2 were still caught by Mama and taken out, and the door was sealed shut with tape. A moment later, I reappeared with a communication tool in my hand, trying to give it to Norman before being caught by Mama again. This time, the little girl was able to stand happily outside the door, shouting into the cup for Norman to hear. Inside, Norman would occasionally hear Ray complain, telling me I didn't need to shout so loudly into the tin can phone to be heard. In the end, in his large suitcase, Norman only brought this self-designed phone when he left. I, Don, and Gilda bowed our heads, unable to look at this desperate moment. The entire orphanage fell into a somber atmosphere, mixed with the cries of the children seeing Norman off. Only when Norman picked up his suitcase did I become agitated, dropping my crutch and running to hug him. In my hand was the tracking deactivator, hoping Norman could escape. Norman pushed me away forcefully, shouting that this was not the time to use it. He asked why I couldn't understand. He just wanted them to see him off with a smile. I refused, saying I didn't want to cherish that kind of emotion, especially when he didn't want to go. Isabella arrived, interrupting the sorrowful moment, reminding Norman it was time to go. She warned me not to be rash or she would kill me too. Before leaving, Norman only had time to say a few encouraging words to me, telling me not to give up. Ray, as usual, stood in a hidden corner, observing everything unfold. But this last time, Norman caught a glimpse of him. On the path to the gate, Isabella wondered why Norman's luggage was so empty. He calmly replied that it didn't matter what he put in it, he couldn't take it with him anyway. Isabella suddenly spoke up, saying she knew Norman would never run away. It was commendable to have made the right decision, Norman asked. So now you won't ship Emma and Ray until the very end, and they will live happily in the house, right? Yes, a happy life, Isabella replied. But Norman didn't stop. He suddenly asked another question. Are you truly happy, Mom? This unexpected question shocked Isabella, but she quickly concealed her emotions and answered yes, especially after meeting someone like Norman. The iron gate opened, and Norman, following his memory, went to look at the truck where Connie had been killed. Isabella opened another door, told Norman to go inside, and the door slammed shut again, just in time to catch a glimpse of Norman's astonished eyes. Things didn't go according to my plan. Ever since Norman was shipped out, I had lost my vitality, just quietly gazing at the sky and earth. According to Phil, he had never seen me so sad, and Ray was the same. Phil could only think that the 2 of them must be very lonely. After all, the 3 of them had been very close. One evening, I, along with Don and Gilda, went to Ray's room telling him to do something. But Ray just bowed his head in despair, ignoring them, saying they would all die here. I took out the tracking deactivator and placed it in front of Ray, but he didn't care, just told me to take it and run if I wanted to. I returned to my room and lay on the bed, crying loudly. Isabella opened the door, followed me in, and hugged me, saying, "Poor child, you must be in so much pain." She listed every pain the little girl was enduring. Norman was dead, Ray had become withdrawn, and I couldn't do anything on my own. She let go of me and told me to give up. The best way to stop feeling pain is to give up. Isabella sat on the bed, looking at me seriously, persuading me that if I wanted, she could recommend me to become a mama of a farm. I would become an adult, have children, and if my abilities were recognized, I could return to the farm as a mama or a sister. I agitatedly pushed her away, but Isabella grabbed my head, looking straight into my eyes. She guessed my thoughts. Who would do such a thing? But it didn't matter because now I couldn't save anyone. Being cursed until death is a painful, vicious cycle. She looked straight into those terrified eyes, emphasizing accepting despair and freeing myself. I cried loudly, refusing, saying I absolutely would not do it. Mama lost her patience, stood up, and reminded them that they couldn't escape and should just slowly wait for death. Time passed, and everyone got used to my and Ray's dejected faces until the last night before Ray was shipped out. He was holding an album containing photos of me and Norman. Wanting to say goodbye to the house, the sound of my crutch echoed one by one in the darkness as I approached Ray. He asked if I had really given up, but received no answer. A moment later, Ray decisively closed the album in his hands, looked at me, and asserted that I hadn't given up. My long, bowed head finally lifted to look at Ray, my determined eyes shining in the dark. I had been thinking about what to do for Norman during this time, and the answer was to do nothing. However, I would not let Norman die in vain, Ray spoke up, saying they had the same thought. For the past 2 months, they hadn't spoken to each other for fear that Mama would see and realize their intentions. Isabella had become very cautious. Even though Ray and I did nothing, they were still being watched. The good thing about this was that she couldn't observe everyone else if she kept focusing on me. Therefore, this time, Dawn and Gilda were responsible for training for the escape and preparing other things. Currently, everything was fully prepared from necessities, food, and warm clothes, ready to escape at any time. I had also calculated the escape time for tomorrow afternoon before Ray was shipped out. Hearing this step, Ray objected because running in the daytime would be very risky. The situation was no longer the same as before. Ray pointed to the chair beside him, telling me to sit down. He began to point out the first situation. Mama was always watching the two of us, not to mention, she always had the youngest child by her side. It was like that during the day, but at night, she would leave the child in her room. In order to escape, they could only get away from Mama and separate her from the kids. Next was the cliff. They couldn't climb down from there. There was only one bridge and not enough time for all the kids to escape. Ray wanted to know what I intended to do about the mentioned obstacles. Ray took out a can of gasoline from under the bed with the intention of burning the house. When Mama was distracted putting out the fire, they would lead the kids outside under the pretext of an evacuation. By blocking the secret room, Mama wouldn't be able to report and the headquarters would just think it was a fire. The guards wouldn't be concentrated at the bridge and the kids would take the opportunity to escape. Ray had also hidden 10 alcohol bombs behind a rock in the forest. He planned to have everyone throw those alcohol bombs at the nearby farms when they were on the bridge. If successful, the fires would confuse the guards. After explaining his plan, Ray told me to move the plan to tonight instead of tomorrow. Ray also told me not to worry because the fire room was far from the kids' room and there was enough time to escape. Then he looked at my legs, which were still on crutches. Understanding that look, I dropped the crutches and stomped my foot on the floor to show Ray my leg was fine. But I was still worried because what if Mama didn't care about the fire? She might give up on putting out the fire and focus on monitoring the children, the merchandise. Ray knew that possibility was very high, so just creating a fire wasn't enough. He opened a can of gasoline and poured it all over himself, then smiled, saying this was the best way. The child with the highest score being burned on the day of shipment. She would absolutely not let that happen. Ray's somber face seemed to blend into the darkness. He had been waiting for this day for a very long time. This was the children's revenge. Ray told me the truth. He was never one who liked to study or read books, but he had endured and worked hard to push his value to the highest. For 12 years, he had been the feast they were waiting for. But tonight, he would destroy them. Ray shouted that he didn't care about the food or the farm. He was a human and would absolutely not let them eat him. Ray calmed down and told me there was only one chance. I had to succeed and not let his and Norman's deaths be in vain. Isabella looked at the number on the calendar that had just been crossed out, whispering, "Goodbye, Ray." When she was assaulted by an unpleasant smell, she ran towards the source of the smell. And when the door burst open, she only saw me kneeling on the ground, calling Ray's name. I shouted loudly, calling for Mama to quickly save Ray, who was still inside. She quickly told Gilda to take everyone outside and carry the children from her room. Isabella grabbed the fire extinguisher and returned to the room, whispering that she at least had to preserve the brain, but the extinguisher was broken and couldn't put out the fire. She turned to tell me to quickly leave as well. However, she was only met with a dark void. Noticing something was amiss, Isabella used the tracking device to search, and what she found was my severed ear lying in the dark room. Going back to when Ray had just started the fire, I had stopped his action. This time, I would not let Ray and the kids die anymore. Just then, Tama and Lanyon brought the items I needed and announced that everyone was ready to escape. What the two little ones brought would be what created the smell, to substitute for Ray. The two children also brought clothes for Ray to change into. I whispered into Ray's ear the words that Norman had entrusted. "It doesn't matter where you die, but it shouldn't be here, so just shut up and follow." Norman had known about Ray's self-immolation plan to save them, and had managed to write out the entire next plan and give it to me. The plan would be executed on the night before Ray's birthday by using the fire Ray intended to create, saving Ray, deceiving Mama, and escaping with everyone. When the fire broke out, the kids, following my instructions, ran to the wall. Isabella naturally wanted to go to the secret room to report. However, her key had been swapped with a key Crone had left for me. On the way to escape, Ray wondered what happened when the kids learned the truth about the farm and Mama. Don told Ray it was all my plan. I believed the kids weren't as childish as they thought. Therefore, when they learned about the monsters and the danger, the kids would voluntarily join the escape. Initially, Don only told 4 children, luring them to Crone's room to hear about the farm from her own mouth. For the rest, Don and Gilda took 2 months to bring them in. Don was very proud of what he had done. Surely Mama would not have any suspicions. I had pretended to give up, but was actually giving instructions to everyone. The plan had been prepared bit by bit until today. I led the kids to climb the wall, encouraging them that they would escape successfully according to what they had practiced. Isabella was still standing in front of the house, watching the growing fire with overwhelming emotions. She opened her hand, holding my ear, and laughed heartily, saying that everything had burned, but she would not let her children escape. Suddenly, Phil approached from behind, pulling on Isabella's fluffy skirt, calling, "Mama!" Ray suddenly realized that no children under 4 were running with them. I told him I had left them behind. I had thought about everything Ray had said before. The plan had gone smoothly, but with the children under 4, problems arose. Don questioned, would they believe them, or could they keep a secret? Gilda also identified another problem. Could they take the kids with them? Gilda didn't doubt Norman's plan, but their challenge was the cliff in winter, and Norman wasn't with them. Even after escaping, there were still many situations they couldn't anticipate. Gilda felt it was a bit late to talk about this, but Ray's thinking wasn't wrong. Don asked what Gilda meant. Did she want to let them be killed? He disagreed. I spoke up, interrupting the argument, saying everyone was right, but I couldn't let anyone else be shipped out. I wanted everyone to get out of danger. Gilda repeated my words, everyone, and asked, so what about the children at the other farms? She questioned, is it okay if only they escape? I, hearing this, was confused. I had never thought about this before. Don also had the same feeling as the two of them, so he could only look at me, waiting for my decision. I asked them to bring Phil over so I could tell him everything about the house and Mama. Phil, despite being young, was not surprised by everything that was happening. He had always wondered why Krona frequently talked about harvesting without clarifying the meaning. And she had also rummaged through Ray's closet. There was also the fact that I had been afraid of Mama after Norman was shipped out. Mentioning Norman, the little boy couldn't hold back his tears and burst out crying. I hugged the boy, telling him about my dilemma of having to choose between taking them along or leaving the children under 4 behind. The condition for them to be harvested was to be at least 6 years old, and if the house focused more on quality, the harvesting pace would slow down. I continued that, in order to raise high-quality children again, they couldn't kill the children with potential. Accordingly, the 6 4-year-olds and Phil all scored high. In the worst-case scenario, I thought they would still have at least 2 more years. Phil smiled and replied that he could wait, so they should leave them behind. Back to the present, I affirmed to Ray that I would not abandon them and would come back. That would be when we get Phil and everyone else out of the farm. Isabella, through Phil, found the remaining children and immediately used the radio to report the situation to headquarters. The alarm bell rang everywhere, and the kids didn't have enough time to get to the bridge as planned. I pointed straight towards the forest opposite the wall. They would cross there. Norman had made it clear that everyone would think they would use the bridge to escape, which is why they wouldn't use the bridge, but escape directly from the cliff. Norman had checked both the distance and the terrain shape. Hearing Ray's worried, heavy breathing, Gilda told him that everything would be all right. They had practiced a lot. Don started by throwing a roll of rope across the chasm. The rope spun and tied itself securely to a tree trunk. Then, he used a hook to slide straight down to the forest. The little children followed Don's example, one by one, using the ropes to slide to the forest. In the midst of his unabated astonishment, Ray seemed to see an image of Norman standing beside him, laughing heartily for having deceived him. Norman told him to look at the sight they never thought possible. Ray admitted that he thought taking the little ones along was unimaginable and considered them a hindrance. Norman replied that he had hesitated too, but thanks to my decision, everyone had trusted me because I was Emma. Ray heard the last words, "Don't give up," from Norman. And when he looked again, his image was gone. Isabella received information that the kids were not found at the bridge, and she suddenly had a thought but didn't believe the kids could do it. Leaving her luggage behind, Isabella ran straight towards the wall. When she arrived at the chase, only I remained, preparing to slide down the rope. After I reached the other side, the ropes were cut by the children, leaving them fluttering silently in the dark night. Isabella, seeing this image, recalled moments from her own childhood. She too had had an innocent life with friends. There was someone who had played a beautiful melody for her, but in the end, he was taken away by Mama. She too had stood on that high wall wanting to escape, but lacked the courage and had to return to Mama. Then came the image of being chosen and becoming a mother. In her memory, she met Ray sitting under a tree, humming the song she had once heard. Ray asked her why she gave birth to him. Now she could answer that question. She wanted to live longer. But perhaps this was enough now. She admitted defeat. Isabella went to hide the ropes that were still fluttering in the wind, silently wishing them a safe journey. Isabella prayed that her children would find the light. Phil had been waiting worriedly for Isabella to return. She understood this and told the boy not to worry. His siblings had escaped safely. Ignoring Phil standing there, she hugged the remaining children, apologizing for scaring them. The children had seen their light. I silently called out to Norman, saying we did it. This is the first step. I will definitely come back to save everyone. The children, for the first time, were greeted by the rays of dawn from the outside world. A new life awaits. My story ends here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turned on notifications. Thanks for watching until the end of the video, and see you again.